Chapter 1818 Heaven's Sorrow and Prayer for Destruction. Demon God Wu was waiting here bored. What was he waiting for? Of course, he was waiting for the arrival of the human army. That's right, they were playing a game, or perhaps a sacrifice. They tried everything, but they didn't find what they wanted. According to legend, there was a great god-level civilization like them who chose this path. It is said that only they successfully avoided the fate of reincarnation and lived forever with a very high civilization. They needed the guidance of the great god-level civilization and their technology to continue their civilization, which was about to decay in history. But until now, they had used almost all means and had not touched the great god-level civilization. Continuous excavation only found some relics that were not of much value. There was not much time left for them. Perhaps the creatures living on the surface of this generation, the bacteria and moss on the surface of this planet, were the key to opening the door. But they are so weak. What can they do to help us? Is such a sacrifice really meaningful? Demon God Wu raised his head and looked at the sky. The words of the six wings echoed repeatedly in his center. This is their guess. It is the changes in this world that have aroused the interest of the great god-level civilization, which has made them open their eyes and observe the whole world. So, as a low-level civilization, they have to start a gorgeous performance. Come on, let me see what kind of surprises the civilization of this era can create, Demon God Wu said softly. The sky was dead silent, and there was only the movement of the engineering troops on the ground. All the movements within hundreds of miles were within their control, but he did not find any signs of human arrival. Fortunately, he was very patient because he had spent countless years of silence in the past. Fortunately, he was no longer a human, but just a machine. Machines don't feel bored. Maybe that's it. He even began to slowly forget the meaning of life, and the feeling of pain had long become a forgotten physical feeling in his mind. The body was weak, and the machine ascended. They once thought that they had succeeded and could become eternal. But now they sadly discovered that they had failed. Demon God Wu thought boredly. But the next moment, a warm feeling came, breaking his solitary thinking. The sensor indicated that the temperature around him was rising sharply. Heat energy is a common energy reaction, and this energy is very strong and can be easily detected. The eyes of the demon God Wu were instantly lit up with excitement, and the fluctuations of the electrical signals flowing in his electronic core were more obvious than usual. He raised his head, and all the mechanical life forms in the entire area also raised their heads because they sensed the powerful force. The sky was dyed red, and the clouds were red, as if they were burning. Everything was burned by a raging fire in all directions. Boom! The roar of breaking through the air continued, causing the earth to tremble wildly. The demon God Wu looked up and saw the thing. He cracked his mouth. The metal teeth were not for eating, but just to preserve some of his form as a carbon-based creature. But the expression on his face at this time was not anger and fear, but excitement. In the sky, an extremely huge meteorite with a diameter of hundreds of kilometers covered the sky and the sun, burning with raging flames, and descended with an unstoppable attitude. If Zhang Yi was at the scene, he could swear that this must be one of the most spectacular scenes he has ever seen in his life. Even the explosion of the god of death of love, or even the battle between the gatekeeper of the underworld and Bai Longzi, could not compare to it. The former was not visually impactful enough, and the latter was too fast so that he didn't even come to his senses before it was over. Only the landing of a huge meteorite that was enough to cover the sky would make people excited and terrified to the point that their souls began to tremble. Demon God Wu squatted on the ruins, supporting the ground with his limbs, raising his neck high, and opening his mouth to the sky. All mechanical civilizations made the same move at the same time. From the mouth of Demon God Wu, a red energy beam shot up into the sky, as if a red mountain was erected from the earth. Thousands of energy attacks, like a meteor shower, flowed back to the sky, and the entire land was covered with colorful brilliance, which was particularly dazzling. Soon, thousands of energies centered on the attack of Demon God Wu collided with a huge meteorite. Boom boom! The meteorite rubbed against the air, and there were bursts of roars, followed by the sound of explosions. A large number of pits appeared on the meteorite, and large pieces of meteorite fragments splashed and fell, shooting in all directions. The small meteorite fragments were only the size of a palm, and the large ones were even comparable to a small hill.
Such an attack
Was unimaginable. Demon God Wu concentrated a large number of super-large mechanical life forms to impact the left corner of the meteorite. It was absolutely unrealistic to smash it directly, so his choice was to use the impact to change its landing trajectory. Sure enough, half of the meteorite that was shattered was affected, and the meteorite that was originally falling to the center of this area fell to the side. The unimaginable huge meteorite, in a posture that could be clearly seen from hundreds of miles away, seemed to collide with the Earth at a slow speed, but it was actually very fast.
charge.
The shock waves swept across in an instant, and the strong storm also took away almost everything around. The sound could no longer be heard. The shock wave formed a huge vacuum field around. All that could be seen was the terrifying power mixed with the flames of friction with the atmosphere, which directly destroyed countless mechanical life forms. Demon God Wu dodged the attack, but the shock wave still destroyed everything around him. The earth was burning, and his defense field blocked the impact, but he looked around and didn't see where the enemy was. Is it an accident? Demon God Wu even said this in a self-deprecating manner. Could it be that they were so unlucky that a meteorite would fall from the sky? But he knew that this was not a punishment from the Creator. Because they had given up their existence as carbon-based creatures, this was a way to get a bug. They had tried to use this to gain longevity but ultimately failed. At this moment, he suddenly keenly noticed that the space had fluctuated. More than 10 kilometers away from him, a huge green door quickly formed in midair. Newton and Brian walked out of the green space gate fully armed. Even the white Labrador was dressed neatly today, with a green Albert Force helmet on his head. Behind them, hundreds of Albert Force soldiers walked out. Their bodies looked like they were customized in the factory, and there was not much difference in height and size. Seeing the burning earth in front of him, Brian put away the teleportation gun in his hand, and the green space gate behind him closed. I think all the machine monsters should be smashed to death now, Brian said with his hands on his waist with a proud look. Such a cool method took a lot of effort. He stretched out his claws and said with a look of seeking credit. The huge meteorite just now was Brian's ability, Heavenly Prayer. Brian can control gravity, and he can even lift an aircraft carrier effortlessly. But such an attack in front of him would take a lot of effort even for him. After all, first he and Newton worked together to grab a piece of land on the Earth, and then let it push it into the atmosphere in a state of weightlessness. The actions of inorganic objects will not attract the attention of the mechanical army, and their mechanical equipment cannot detect celestial bodies without any electronic signals. Moreover, maintaining control over the huge meteorite for a long time also requires Brian to have extremely strong control ability. But fortunately, the final result was very smooth. They successfully used this trick to clear most of the battlefield, causing the huge mechanical army to lose at least 3/4. Hey, Brian, they're not that easy to deal with. Newton pushed his glasses with a dead face and reminded. He then looked around, and sure enough, a warning appeared in his glasses. Look, I said. Demon God Wu and several super-large mechanical life forms appeared opposite them.
With
such an attack, Newton did not expect it to be able to directly destroy all of the opponent. The target of the meteorite was too obvious and would definitely be intercepted, so their initial goal was just to use it to clear the field. Now it seems that the plan is going very smoothly. And the real battle has just started at this moment. The members of Abel's army quickly dispersed, all of them carrying huge backpacks, which even looked heavier than themselves. But these soldiers seemed to be unaffected by the stuff on their backs, galloping across the ground, like gusts of wind sweeping across the battlefield still burning with raging flames. Soon, they opened their backpacks and took out some huge metal instruments from them, pointing them in the shape of a trumpet at the entire battlefield in front of them. They also made something similar to Fremonza's anti-defense force field instrument. As the world's top military and technological power, they could not be defenseless against this. The muzzles of the 5 super-large mechanical life forms were all pointed at them. The demon god Wu looked at these humans and a dog, and the alloy teeth in his mouth touched each other, making a sound similar to a wild laugh. Without any signs, a surging energy cannon was fired directly at them. Brian raised his claws and gently pressed down towards the front. The energy cannon that was shooting straight at them suddenly shot towards their ground like a bent steel bar. Boom! The ground was broken, and the earth and rocks were flying. Newton grabbed Brian's body and quickly retreated to the back. "Hey, I've made it so that he can't hit us," Brian said. Newton said coldly, "Next time when you change direction, please choose to twist his attack toward the sky." Before they successfully landed, the attacks of 5 super-large mechanical life forms had already been fired at them densely. Newton raised the atheist in his hand and pulled the trigger directly. The couple's combined strength formed a huge energy net, blocking the dense energy barrage. He began to command the battle of Albert's team members in an orderly manner on the communication channel. Destroy those 5 super-large mechanical life forms. After removing those minions, they can deal with the demon god Wu in front of them more easily. After the demon god Wu found that his attack was twisted, the system judged that the ability mastered by the other party was to change the direction of the force. Combined with the move of falling meteors from the sky, it can be judged as the control of gravity. Is that so? The demon god Wu stretched his arms behind him and took down 2 huge scimitars from his back. The blade is in 2 sections, shaped like a huge sickle, but each sickle, when extended, looks bigger than his body. "He looks like he's planning to have a hearty weapons battle with us," Brian said, and actually took out a gun, but soon he threw the gun to the ground. "Forget it. My claws are not suitable for human weapons." The demon god Wu spread his arms, and the 2 huge scimitars were like the double blades of a cockroach, and his body became very exaggerated. The storm surged. His speed is already difficult to distinguish with the naked eye, and it can only be judged by the emergence of endless storms. He has approached the 2 of them. "I'm not good at fighting with others. I'm a civilized dog." Brian screamed in shock, but the next moment, his right hand pressed down hard again. With him as the center, the space in the circular area around him produced a visible distortion. An enormous force seemed to fall from the sky, crushing everything towards the earth. Super heavy pressure. The earth collapsed, and the sound of roaring came into the ears. The body of the demon god Wu was suddenly smashed to the ground while rushing forward. A moment later, it can be seen that the land under the feet of Brian and Newton has become an isolated island. Outside the isolated island, in a circular area with a radius of 2 kilometers, the ground sank dozens of meters. This is the ground that has been hit by a meteorite. It is as solid as metal, but it is still compacted again by Brian's super heavy pressure ability. His ability to control gravity is enough to control a huge meteorite in the sky for a long time. "Oh, hey, Biaro. You're still underground and have a good rest." Brian had a mean look on his face, wagging his tail proudly and arrogantly. But suddenly, the ground, which was already stronger than metal, suddenly broke apart. A black figure soared into the sky, and the demon god Wu held 2 huge sickles in his hands. The sickles stretched out with a swoosh and slashed at Brian. F***K. Brian was a little panicked, and soon he opened his claws, 1,000 times the gravity. A huge force enveloped the head of the demon god Wu, suppressing his body and smashing him to the ground. The body of the demon god Wu was smashed into the ground again. But this time, he soon grinned and slowly climbed up. Brian shouted in panic, "Damn, this guy is covered in iron." If he were a human, he would have been squeezed into minced meat long ago. Newton ignored Brian. He glanced at Brian, started the propulsion system of his combat suit, and flew away. He was going to deal with those super-large mechanical life forms. "Okay, then this guy is up to you to deal with." Seeing Newton leave without looking back, Brian was a little flustered. "Hey, Biaro, you can't just leave me alone like this." A dog. I'm a pacifist. I don't like fighting." Behind him, the blazing earth, the huge meteorite embedded in the earth, and the countless broken mechanical life forms silently accused him of his absurd remarks. "Brian, you're a damn white bishop-level alien dog. Don't be pitiful to me here." Newton couldn't help but cursed viciously. "Don't always pretend to be pitiful. I don't really treat you as a dog." Brian looked at Newton eagerly as he left without looking back. His ears drooped, and his expression was a little lost. "I don't want it either. If I can choose, I would rather be a quiet, beautiful dog. Of course, it would be better to have a few more beautiful bitches to accompany me." The earth trembled wildly at this time, and the demon god Wu stood up under the huge pressure, and his wild laughter reached Brian's ears. "Ha ha ha. Interesting, is this the ability that creatures like you have? It's really weird, but it doesn't work for me," he told Brian in human language. "The material used to make me is an alloy smelted from the deepest part of the earth. With your level of pressure, you can't hurt me." Brian swallowed his saliva, and then his eyes became firm in an instant. "Well, the damn Newton has abandoned me. Now I want to fight for myself." He waved his big claws fiercely, 2,000 times the gravity. The stronger gravity enveloped the body of the demon god Wu, and his body suddenly bent down, and his waist bent to 90 degrees. But soon, he stood up again after adapting to this force, with a look of brutal murderous intent in his eyes. He hasn't felt this way for too long. I still remember that when he was still a flesh and blood body, he was a berserker who was keen on killing. Being suppressed again and again by Brian's ability, he aroused his long-forgotten fighting spirit. "I want to chop you into pieces." Brian roared, 5,000 times the gravity, 8,000 times the gravity, 10,000 times the gravity. He kept adding more and more power, causing the body of the demon god Wu to quickly sink into the depths of the earth. It was hard to imagine that the soil could be compressed to this extent. And every time it was suppressed, the demon god Wu. The body of the demon god Wu will quickly adjust the power output to adapt to the pressure given by Brian. After all, he is a mechanical body, not flesh and blood. As long as he outputs enough power to adapt to this gravity, everything will be fine. This time, it seems a bit bad. Seeing that his ability could not crush the demon god Wu into pieces, Brian took a few steps back in panic, and his dog paws were helplessly scratching the ground. "Ha!" The demon god Wu broke through his gravity field, and the two knives in his hands emitted a cold light and rushed straight to Brian. Brian screamed, "Damn it, I said I won't fight." In a panic, he pointed both hands at the demon god Wu. The demon god Wu sneered, "It's useless, I have already adapted to your power. Now let me chop you into pieces." Brian's brain was in chaos. In a hurry, a flash of inspiration flashed in his brain, and his eyes became firm in an instant, and his ability was released 100%. Whoosh! A black light disappeared from in front of him, leaving a straight black line in the air, and then quickly ran towards the sky and turned into a shining star. Brian covered his eyes with one hand, watching the demon god Wu being sent away by himself, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. "Huh? I was really scared, but fortunately I can not only increase gravity but also reduce gravity." The demon god Wu, who was originally under the action of 10,000 times gravity, was thrown directly into the sky by Brian due to the excessive force used under the increase and decrease of gravity. According to the degree of force he exerted at that time, this speed could reach the first cosmic speed and fly around the planet. Brian knew that the guy would not be able to come back for a while, so he ran towards the direction where Newton was. After all, a dog is a dog. Although it runs on its two hind legs, its speed is still very fast. "Newton, wait for me. I think we can still talk. That guy is too hard. I'm not a scrap collection station. I don't have a compressor to crush him." Brian followed Newton and complained crazily. Newton raised his glasses. "Let's deal with those big guys first." At this time, the soldiers of the Albert team had already surrounded the area in front of the super-large mechanical life form. The attack power of the super-large mechanical life form is very strong. The powerful laser cannon swept across the ground wantonly, directly tearing the ground apart and leaving a huge gap. However, the The reaction speed of the able warriors was extremely sensitive. Facing the attack of the super-large mechanical life form, they were able to dodge very flexibly. The speed was even faster than that of ordinary enhanced aliens. If only some of the able warriors were like this, it would be fine, but all the able warriors in front of them were like this. There was a faint red light in their eyes, like lightning running on the battlefield. Facing the mechanical life forms blocking the way ahead, they drew their weapons cleanly. The huge special shoulder cannon, pistol, cross-shaped sword, and machete exerted a powerful power in their hands. They actually used close combat to directly tear apart those guys with steel and iron bones. The attack power of the super-large mechanical life form is no joke. The energy rays that raged on the battlefield like spider webs still cut some able warriors into pieces. However, a horrifying scene happened. Their broken bodies fell to the ground, but they did not die immediately. Instead, the fallen pieces of flesh were wriggling violently. The pieces of flesh were wriggling on the ground like reptiles and automatically pieced together. The faces of the injured able warriors did not show any fear of death. Instead, they became more excited because of the injury, and their eyes burst into a more red light. Even if half of the head was cut off, they could quickly pick up the other half and piece it together, and then the broken body quickly merged into one.